Welcome to our 8th annual Founders Day event. My name is Chuck Sawyer, and I'm going to do just a brief introduction because I'm the least important presenter here at noon. And I want to just kind of set the table because I've been here long enough to have worked with and served every president that has served Northwestern, beginning with John Wolf's father, Dr. Jack Wolf. And it occurred to me when Debbie asked me to make the introductions that I should just give you a screenshot of the study by Dr. David Eisenberg. It was published in the late 90s. That is the reason why we are a health sciences university. So we've got the son of the founding president of Northwestern, Dr. John Wolf Jr., and we've got the president emeritus of Northwestern, Dr. John Allenberg. John, could you stand and raise your hand? So I want to tell you a quick story. This study was published, which broke the news about the very significant expenditures for, at the time, unconventional providers. Well, first of all, there's nothing unconventional about anybody in this room, so let's bury that notion. But it was huge. Large numbers of folks doing all kinds of things that were considered alternative and unconventional, and a lot of out-of-pocket expense. So Dr. John Allenberg, when this study came out, I don't know if I was in your office, John, or you walked down to my office, and he said, Chuck, we can't let the University of Minnesota do this. So what he meant was, we've got to transform ourselves from a single-purpose institution, the chiropractic profession, to a health sciences university, because if we don't do it, the University of Minnesota would. Now, that was both the vision and the pragmatism of a president that was looking at what was on the horizon and what was actually happening right at the moment because of that study. So that in large measure, and I'll skip all the other details about how we went through the process and this and that, but it was because largely of that report that we could see the future and why we added new colleagues, new students, new disciplines, and transformed this institution. So that's enough for me. We've got 3 presenters, and they all have an important role. Dr. John Wolf Jr., who's both a third-generation chiropractic doctor and an attorney, and I understand he plays the piano very well. John has been with us for many years, and he's going to talk about a chiropractic doctor that I remember watching provide care when I was an intern and then a young member of our faculty. John's going to talk about the legacy of Dr. Ed Wallach. And then we're very honored to have Barbara Davis with us, who's the daughter of really would you call your mom the godmother or the pioneer that introduced acupuncture to the state of Minnesota and particularly the Twin Cities. And it was Edith Davis that was really the origin of our acupuncture college here at Northwestern. And then the third presenter is Joni Holtz, who was a founding faculty member, charter faculty member of our School of Massage Therapy. I've come to know Joni through the years and have admired her work. And you know, she was one of the engineers of our very fine therapeutic massage therapy program at Northwestern. In other words, right from the get-go, it's clinical. And the intent was to provide training for massage therapists who could go into various clinical settings, and Joni is the quintessential example of that. So that's enough for me. First presenter, Dr. John Wolf.
Thank you. This is delighted to be able to do this for the 8th time. This was the idea for Founders Day came from our former dean and provost, Dr. Mike Wiles. I think it was a great idea. I'm glad we've continued it, and I'm glad I have this opportunity to recognize a name that may not be very well remembered on campus, but should be. Ed Wallach served Northwestern at its inception, kind of the glue that held it together in the very early days, and then toward the end of his life gave us another boost, another tremendous boost. Ed was born in 1912 on his parents' general purpose farm, later became a dairy farm near Anoka. By age 18, he wanted to get out from under the yoke of the farm and took up painting, working as a painter in an auto body shop. Ed had an 8th grade education. Ed Wallach had an 8th grade education. So please keep that in mind. I think that might be relevant a little bit later. In 1934, Ed married Lilas Coro. And Lilas had a high school education and a good job at Honeywell. By 1940, Ed was an assistant in a milk-producing company. His folks had moved off the farm and into the city, and Ed and Lilas lived with them at 812 East 33rd Street, the building that's still there. Sometime prior to 1938, Ed suffered a serious injury that left him literally unable to walk, and he was given up by the medical profession. They said, "You will not walk again." And it was through a chiropractic treatment by a doctor whose name is probably lost to history, unless someone in here knows, but that Ed was able to walk again and decided right then he was going to be a chiropractor. So he enrolled at the only chiropractic institution in Minnesota at the time, the Minnesota Chiropractic College. We sometimes consider Minnesota as one of our predecessor institutions in that we hold all of their records. But really, we're not. We were not a continuation of them. We're a separate entity. Minnesota had instituted a basic science exam in 1927. It was an effort by organized medicine to contain or eliminate irregular practitioners. If you wanted to practice any healing art, dentistry, chiropractic, whatever it was, medicine, you had to pass this examination. They wanted to get rid of irregular practitioners, particularly chiropractors, as chiropractors were the greatest threat. Osteopaths were also a threat, but their numbers were much lower. I happened to be over in some early 20th century osteopathic records at the Minnesota History Center last week, and the basic science exam was absolutely devastating for the osteopathic profession, just like it was for the chiropractic profession. We first got licensure in Minnesota in 1919, and in the first 8 years of licensure, 592 chiropractors were licensed in Minnesota. Once the basic science exam went into effect, things got a little different. One license issued in 1928, one in 29, not a single license issued in 1930. No one could pass the basic science exam. Look at that. Look at the years with the zeros in them. That's fewer than 2 new chiropractors a year for an entire 10-year period. Minnesota College, at the time that Ed enrolled, was a 4-year program. This was standard in a lot of states. It was contrary to the Palmer School and B.J. Palmer, who insisted until 1951 that 18 months was sufficient education for a chiropractor. Nonetheless, Minnesota College was a 4-year program. And a Palmer graduate coming to Minnesota would have to attend an additional 14 months somewhere in order to be eligible for licensure. This was true for a 1938 Palmer graduate who, before he was able to take the basic science exam, had to serve 14 months at Minnesota. So Wallach and Wolf were students at at Minnesota College at the same time. My father took the basic science exam in 1940 but failed the chemistry portion. To remedy that, he took a job teaching chemistry, and the next year famously aced it, the first 100% score on the chemistry portion of the basic science exam. So on June 2nd, 74 years ago today, Northwestern was founded with the idea that we ought to be able to pass the basic science exam. The basic science exam is not a bad thing. The basic science exam is a good thing. If you're going to practice healing, you ought to know the same basic sciences as anybody else who's going to practice healing. So 74 years ago, Northwestern opened in 2 rented rooms on the 6th floor of a medical office building in downtown Minneapolis. 6 faculty went with them, 6 students went with them, and Ed Wallach was one of those 6 students. That's the building 608 Nicollet. You can see it's called Medical Office Block. Had a department store on the 1st floor. Northwestern started in 2 rented rooms on the 6th floor. By the end of the 40s, we had 2 entire floors in that building, but started in 2 rooms. Ed Wallach, for all his importance to this institution, evaded cameras. There are so few images of him available, but there's one. There's Ed right there. And there's John Wolf, and there's a few students in those 6th floor rooms. So the place is open a whole 6 months when the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. And anybody who's eligible is gone, instantly gone. That meant almost all of the 6 students and almost all of the 6 faculty. My father had been in ROTC at Minnesota, so he was called up immediately, stationed in Australia for most of the war, but Ed ran Northwestern during the war years. He came in the fall of 1941 as a 4th-year student. He graduated that spring, and he ran Northwestern during the war years. His wife, Lilas, was the registrar, and of course, registrar also meant administrative assistant for everyone and anyone who needed help. And my grandfather, R.A. Wolf, acted as dean during those years. Here's our catalog from 46. We don't have an earlier version. But here's Lilas. Here's Ed as business manager, a title he held from 1942 through 1949. My father's undergraduate training was as a civil engineer, so his final assignment during World War II was to write that portion of the strategic bombing survey that had to do with the effects of the atomic weapons on the infrastructure of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I've thrown this in before. The officers got to stay at Frank Lloyd Wright's Imperial Hotel in Tokyo. But the strategic bombing survey was completed by June of 1946. So from September of 45 until June of 46, my father was in Washington, D.C. working on the strategic bombing survey. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel at age 32, and they wanted to keep him and said, look, you're 2 clicks away from general at age 32. If you achieve the rank of general, you can retire and have a salary for the rest of your life. This was very, very attractive, and he was starting to think about it. But Ed Wallach reminded him, no. That wasn't the deal. You're going to get back here as soon as possible. I didn't sign up to be running this place. And of course, he came back in the summer of 46, and Northwestern absolutely blossomed with all of the returning veterans. Ed graduated, here's his transcript, in May of 1942 and did not pass the basic science exam in 1942, or 43, or 44, or 45, or 46, or 47. Ed passed the basic science exam in 1948. You may recall one of Northwestern's distinctions is we are the first chiropractic institution to require 2 years of college. And I've got to believe it's because my father's dear friend Ed Wallach could not pass the basic science exam that it was absolutely clear that you can't enter chiropractic without some college education. Ed remained at Northwestern through the 48-49 school year when he went into practice with his brother-in-law, Bob Malone, at 1106 West Lake Street, an office that had partitions that didn't reach the ceiling, and Ed was a chain smoker, and according to his nephew, the office absolutely reeked. During the 50s, Dan Gainey became a patient of Ed Wallach, and don't know how that happened, but Gainey had started selling class rings for a little jeweler in Owatonna, and that jewelry store became the giant Fortune 500 company Jostens that produces all things tied to all graduations. Gainey was and remains, the Gainey line of Arabians remains a famous line of Arabian horses that are still bred to this day. So he had ranches in Minnesota, California, and Arizona. There's Gainey with one of his Arabians. It may be the most famous of all, called Farzan, that is a bloodline that, of course, is very popular. Gainey later became a patient of Dr. Joe Sweary because Jostens was headquartered in Owatonna and Joe practiced in Owatonna. And according to Dr. Sweary, Gainey wanted Joe to treat him the way Ed treated him and asked Joe, and Joe agreed to lie down on the table while Gainey did to Joe what Ed Wallach did to Gainey. Ed Wallach frequently flew on Gainey's private jet to treat Gainey, and famously once to treat a horse. One of these invaluable Arabians that had its head stuck in a fence. In '52, Ed and Lilas built a small home on Eagle Point, Eagle Lake, and just down the road was the place that my grandfather, R.A. Wolf, built in 1922, so we were neighbors. There's Wallach at our place, one of the very few photographs of him, in 1959, and there's Lilas Wallach. This is the point. Wallachs lived here, Wolfs were here, and right here on that skinny little lot 5 was a guy named Gordon Moe. Moe was the assessor for the city of Minneapolis. And in the late 70s, Gainey had given a small grant to Northwestern because Gainey wanted Ed in the clinic teaching Ed's own technique. So we got this small grant, and it allowed Ed to be paid as faculty, and he moved his practice into the Park Avenue Clinic. Gordon Moe found out about this. Gordon Moe found out that Ed Wallach was practicing for profit in a tax-exempt building. And Moe sued Northwestern and tried to take away our tax-exempt status, and the cost of defending that lawsuit exceeded the amount of money that Gainey had given for Ed to be there. It was a real pain. My father never forgot and always said, if you see Moe, kick him in the shins for me. Ed drove back and forth from Big Lake in a 1969 Nova until he had well over 100,000 miles on it, and then he got another one. So Ed Wallach drove a 1969 Nova from 1969 until his death. Ed was the glue that held Northwestern together during the war years and near the end of his own life. He facilitated a gift from Gainey to Northwestern. That gift was part of the land that is now called the Gainey Ranch. I had photographs of it, but we lost some network connection earlier. Gainey Ranch is now a giant resort, golf course, land, hotels near Scottsdale. Northwestern was given some of that land, the sale of which resulted in nearly $500,000, and that money allowed the purchase of this campus. This is our own alumni news announcing that gift, and this is the ACA Journal announcing that gift. Ed Wallach died on January 1st, 1982. I got the news in the anatomy lab in the campus on Mississippi River Boulevard at the beginning of my second term. Lilas lived 20 years after Edward died. She died in June of 2002. Both of them are buried next to each other in Anoka. And I hope Ed Wallach, who's largely forgotten, will now not be forgotten, and that we would not likely be in this campus without him. Thanks.
Thanks, John. I have fond memories of Dr. Wallach. I did my internship in the Park Avenue Clinic, and then when I joined the faculty, I was right back in that same location. And that's when I became a passive cigarette smoker, because he smoked like a furnace, and I spent a lot of time watching him and learning the Wallach technique from a master, at the same time imbibing in the smoke from his office. Barbara Davis was, as I mentioned earlier, the founder of really the acupuncture discipline here. Edith Davis. Her daughter Barbara is here today. But the reason that the acupuncture profession exists in the state of Minnesota is because of Edith Davis. So Barbara is going to reminisce a bit about her mother. Thanks.
Well, can you hear me? Let's see. How about that? I have to thank Dr. Wolf because it really put everything into perspective about what I see in the acupuncture world, which is to look at a parallel profession. And ironic that we should end up together like this. Actually, there was some competition early on when the acupuncture was first starting up, when the Board of Medical Examiners was after us, and they were and the chiropractors were kind of, it was like everybody was dancing around, because some of it does come down to competition for the market. So in reflecting on it, I'm thinking about how acupuncture in the United States is still a fairly new profession. At the time that my mother got involved with it, it was pretty much brand new in terms of being a visible profession. And there's this confluence of society, economics, politics, personalities, and all of that coming together. And the fact was that in the 60s and 70s, as many people know, was a time when so many new ideas were coming into American society. And one of the people who was active in bringing some of these ideas from the East, from China, was Professor Chengman Ching, who was the Tai Chi teacher and herbalist who lived in New York City. Now, I happen to be part of his Tai Chi lineage, and I am actually working on a biography of him, and his life was the same. His life was caught up in the politics of the early Republican China and the Civil War and the Sino-Japanese War and everything, and the struggle between Western medicine trying to be brought into China and confronting the societal attitudes towards modern science versus traditional medicine. And so here we were in the United States then. He came to the United States in 1964, and some of his students came here and taught Tai Chi here. One of their students was Sean Marshall, who became my Tai Chi teacher as well as my parents' Tai Chi teacher. And Sean went on to found the Zhongdao School of Medicine and what's his school's name in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Anyway, so Sean was teaching Tai Chi. My mother, who had had polio as a baby, she had a backache, and so she had to sit down. And Sean said, here, I'll do some acupressure on you. I've been learning acupuncture and acupressure and such. He does acupressure on her, her backache's gone. And so my mother said, I got to learn more about this. She had been working as an editor and a writer and a grant supervisor for the various state agencies, including the nursing board. And she helps do studies on curriculum for nurses. And so I think from that, she derived this interest in education, and then now she had this new thing, Chinese medicine. Now, before all of this is in the mid-70s, before all of this, people like Professor Cheng were practicing quietly, usually in Chinatown, and not for foreigners, just for Chinese, or I should say not for the English speakers, but just among the Chinese community. And like I say, all of this was becoming this mix of new ideas and things. And so to have this new idea to say you can press these points and feel better. Wow, this is really something, And so my mom got involved with putting together curriculum and things for nurses. So then she took that idea and looked at how can we create an educational system and a profession in the arena of Chinese medicine, specifically acupuncture at first. And again, there's just a lot of politics. I'm summarizing like years and years of debate here and years of struggle and years of being considered heretics and cults and things like that. And it's hard to believe because here we are now in this fancy building here, right? So at that point then, my mother began teaching in the living room of the house on 4th Avenue. My dad still lives there. And at some point, those people, such as Vicki Raydell and others, began practicing and began forming the Acupuncture Association and began lobbying for licensure, which I also got involved with that. And at some point, that living room school, the 4th Avenue School, it was called, so to speak, moved to nearby on Chicago Avenue in South Minneapolis. And like with any startup, you're shoveling the snow, you're unclogging the toilet, you're sending out fundraising letters, you're teaching classes, you're running everything. And so between her and my dad and the rest of us in the family and this very nice tight-knit group of students and teachers who became involved at the beginning, the school continued to grow. It then moved to St. Paul to the Griggs Midway building and really had a nice presence there with a very nice layout and official classrooms. It was built, as an office building. And at the point at which my mother was about to retire from the school, from being president of the school, and I should have prefaced this all by saying she started studying acupuncture in her late 50s. and indeed became a model for many of the early students at the Chicago Avenue School, who, a lot of whom were middle-aged women or thereabouts who were working maybe as nurses or PTs or other kinds of healthcare work, or who just wanted a career change. Those who were coming from healthcare work were really eager to find a way to become primary practitioners, because at that point, nurses had very little power in their professions. They had, they just had to do what they were told to do. And I think it was around that time the physician's assistants came into being as an occupation. So this was a really viable occupation for these people to get into. So my mother decided to retire around, it was the age, I believe, of 78. So this is what happens when you found something that you get really involved. There's always tons of work to do. And the profession nationally, locally was expanding so rapidly, but needed a lot of work. And a lot of the things that we take for granted, like licensure, or like the standardization of curriculum. How do you create curriculum that is going to apply across the board when some people are trained in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, some people are trained in 5-element medicine, some people are trained in some other style? How do you create something that's equitable? And my mother in the school had really tried to create an atmosphere where it would be a welcoming, warm place to study, and I think she really succeeded at that. I've heard that over and over again from people who have traveled to other schools, how the atmosphere at this school is remarkably wonderful. She had an interest in these different eclectic styles of acupuncture, and that's one of the reasons the Alumni Association has sponsored the Edith Davis Seminar every fall as a way of continuing that tradition. The curriculum of the school as a whole has had to adapt to other kinds of needs and put in more biomedical hours and things like that. And so we can still have these seminars that push this other idea of looking at what other types of medicine are there within our discipline. What kinds of eclectic styles were taught from grandfather to grandson, or in Professor Cheng's case, his mother was an herbalist. He learned herbs from her early on. What kinds of traditions like that might have gotten lost otherwise? And so the fall seminar, which I hope all of you will come to, often features topics of eclectic nature like this. My mother put together in her practice ideas in a book, a short book that I hope will be coming out next year, called the elements. I can't remember right now, but it's about practicing with the elements, and she really brings together that eclectic approach, which is very much based in her personal history, as well as the kind of situation she encountered in her own practice of bringing together the traditional Chinese medicine, which is known as TCM now, and the 5-element practices and things like that together into one practice. Another focus of hers was making sure that acupuncture would be affordable and accessible to the community, and I think that one aspect of that, which is also a double-edged sword, is her work with the Acupuncture Association of trying to get insurance coverage and get acupuncture into the providers like Health Partners. She was actually on the Health Partners board, or the group health board, which preceded Health Partners, and so that influenced her point of view as well. And so we see a lot of people getting into that community acupuncture model and just getting out there and making acupuncture accessible in the state of Minnesota. So from that early living room kind of scenario with, everybody sitting on the sofa and eating and all this, we see that the profession has dramatically grown from a handful of people to well over 500 practitioners currently doing acupuncture in Minnesota. And there's still room for growth and change, and we see that the school is doing good work in helping reorganize things to make everything work more efficiently, and that will continue moving forwards with the profession as it grows in the United States and in the state of Minnesota. And I think that it's helpful at these Founders Days to recognize people who have helped make that happen, and like I say, to also recognize that each of us has an ability to influence our profession and to create something out of it, to create something new from it, and to see what work remains to be done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Barbara. Seeing your mother's picture reminded me of the first time I met Edith. And although I didn't get to know her well, but the first impression I had was, in addition to her quiet demeanor, my first impression was there's a lot going on in her head. And I later, came to realize that was true. So she was absolutely one of the most important pioneers that's part of Northwestern.
I wanted to say some of the same things that Dr. Sawyer just did. That when this took place, Edith, I can't help but call her Edith. Edith had retired, and she was still overseeing the organization as chair of the board. And the president, his name was Ike Rodman. And we have another guest here. Is Steve Bowles still here? Steve back there. How these things happen, the way the world works is so interesting. Is that Steve was director of interdisciplinary services, and so he was making contact with respected individuals in the health science profession in the metropolitan area. And so Steve made contact with Ike Rodman, and Steve and I and Ike met down near what is now the Twin Stadium on First Avenue North in downtown Minneapolis, and that's when we began our communication about the College of Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine being a part of our university. And the other thing I wanted to say is just I hadn't met Barbara before, and a funny thing, Chuck introduced Barbara, and I never looked up at the picture, and I looked at Barbara, and I thought, golly, she looks just like her mother. And you add 20 years to Barbara's life, and we're looking at her picture right up there, and really, I didn't get a chance to meet with Edith before they joined our campus. And so the first meeting was really just on the campus, and you have to picture Edith at that age while she's sitting in a wheelchair. And but she is such a warm, genuine, caring, helping, thoughtful human being that it made me more proud that the Oriental Medicine was a part of Northwestern, just because even after that I met this person who really started that school. And it's great to have her daughter with us today, isn't it?
We'll have to schedule another event with just Dr. Ellenberg, and it'll be at least 3 hours in duration. And but it'll all be good. Last but certainly not least, we brought Joni here at the turn of the century to help architect our massage therapy program.
Turn of the century. Well, thank you, Dr. Sawyer, and thank you so much. A little piece aside, I happen to love history, not very many people know this part about me, and I'm very involved in my local historical society. So I have this feeling about history that it's so important because it determines where we are today, and it determines where we're going in our future. And so I think history is really important to honor and to acknowledge and to kind of keep it alive at some level. So I appreciate being able to talk about the history of the School of Massage Therapy here at Northwestern. And I don't know if it'll be nearly as interesting as Dr. Wolf's presentation, which was super fantastic, by the way. But anyways, here goes. So in 1999, as you're all probably aware, Northwestern College Chiropractic became Northwestern Health Sciences University under the wise leadership of Dr. John Allenberg. And they were recognizing that there was a growing consumer interest in holistic and natural therapies. And so they acquired the Minnesota Institute of Acupuncture and Herbal Studies, and at the same time they were in conversation with an already existing massage therapy school. And they were considering merging with this school. The decision was made actually not to merge with them, but to actually go out on our own and start our own massage therapy school. And at the time, I was actually teaching at another massage therapy school. I was teaching at Northern Lights, which is now Centerpoint School of Massage Therapy today. And I had been faculty there at that point in time for 10 years. I started when I was 12, in case you're trying to do that quick math there. So I always feel so very old when I reveal the number of years I've been places, but it is the truth. So I had been at Northern Lights for 10 years. I was very committed and dedicated to Northern Lights, and to be honest with you, I had no ever thought of ever leaving Northern Lights. But I had heard that Northwestern had become a university and was thinking about adding a school of massage therapy, and I was quite fascinated by that, and I was also really thrilled because I knew a lot about Northwestern. I had known Dr. Tuchscher and Dr. Swinehart for 10 years, and they were very good friends of mine. I had come here for chiropractic care for myself, so I'd been in the clinic system here. I came and shopped at the bookstore all the time. And I knew the reputation of Northwestern, and I thought this would be so fabulous for the massage profession. If a wonderful entity like Northwestern could start a school and start educating people in the field of massage therapy, it would be such a wonderful place to help elevate the standards of massage therapy and really create a wonderful basic education for massage therapists. So I was really excited at the thought. And I thought, well, if that really happens, if they really do it, I really do want to be a part of that, and maybe I can teach a class there or something. Again, I still had no inkling that or thought that I would ever leave Northern Lights per se. I just wanted to do both, I guess is one of the pieces about me. I'll keep my hand in both pies if I can for a while anyways. So anyways, I called and wanted to find out how I could talk to somebody and get the details, and so the first person that I ended up speaking with was a man named Mike Skoglund. And so Mike was kind of put in charge of the organization and getting this massage therapy program up and running. And I don't remember exactly when I met with him, but what I remember is my first conversation with him on the phone. I kind of liked him because what he said to me is, "It's summer." I said, "Yeah, it is, you're right." And he said, "It's really warm here. Do not come all gussied up in a three-piece suit." He says, "You don't need to impress me, dress cool, and we're going to be meeting in the garden level." I said, "What's the garden level?" He said, "Well, do you know where the bookstore is?" Because remember, that's when the bookstore was downstairs. And I said, "Yeah, I go there all the time." He said, "Well, that's the garden level in my world, and that's where my office is, so we'll be meeting down there, so come dressed for the cool." I said, "Okay." So I came and I met with him, and still thinking I was only going to want to teach one class possibly. And one thing led to another, and they decided not to merge with this other massage therapy school. They decided to open their own school. At that point in time, they didn't have anybody to do anything with the curriculum. So in my conversations over the phone and that kind of thing with Mike Skoglund, it ended up that I was the person that they hired to design the initial curriculum for our program, which I was absolutely thrilled about being able to do that. And so I ended up leaving, let's try the arrow. Well, where else can I go? Oh, there we go. Okay. So I ended up leaving Northern Lights and became official faculty with Northwestern at the end of 1999, and I officially started working January of 2000. And so I spent the first 9 months designing our curriculum for the first year and a half program. We started as an evening program, and our first class of students officially was enrolled to start with September of 2000. We started with a very small number because I wanted to, for every mistake we made, I wanted it to not have a huge impact in our state. So I was like, if we're going to make mistakes, let's do it on a small basis, and then let's really work on getting better after that. So we started with a fairly small class, but we nicknamed them the Fab Five. That was our nickname amongst ourselves for them. So they were the 5 first brave students that we took in, willing to go someplace where there had never been a program before. And so they met Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursday evenings from 6 to 10, and they were here for a year and a half. And in that initial first class, we had 2 faculty members, myself and Beth Bergen. And we taught the entire curriculum for these students with the exception of the anatomy classes. And our fantastic Dr. Kim Swinehart taught the anatomy classes for our first group of students coming in. She taught both the A&P classes as well as the mannequin clay class that we still have in our curriculum called Applied Anatomy. So our first class graduated April of 2002. And as I said, we were an evening-only program because we didn't have a real home yet within the university, and we didn't have a classroom. So we met for that entire time, that entire first year, in L5. And we folded the massage tables up at the end of class and stacked them against the wall. And then we had all of our business and legal aspects, and all the other classes were in L5. And I think that's even where the anatomy classes met too, was in L5. So that's kind of where our first life started, was there. We took in our first day class September of 2001, the following year. And they graduated in August of 2002. And then the other thing that was interesting at the very beginning for us was that we didn't have an official dean for our program for our first couple years. Mike Skoglund was in charge of us for a little while, and he was pulled in lots of different directions and really, really busy. And he also had some health challenges that arose for him. And so after he left, then we were for a little bit under the leadership of Dr. Rob Scott, for those of you that remember Dr. Scott, when he was here within the chiropractic program. And then in September of 2002, we got our first dean, Dr. Dale Healy, who is still our dean, thankfully. And so that is where our leadership started, is with Dr. Healy. At least our full-time leadership started with Dr. Healy in 2002. Really a fun and exciting moment in our lives was when we got our classroom. So this is picture 211, so 209 and 211. And we did get our classroom by about fall of 2001, because that first day class actually had class up here. This is how the classroom looks today. I sadly couldn't find any photos of it before the remodel. But what I remember is that the folding wall between the 2 rooms was a solid brick, partially wood structure. And Dr. Healy and I think it might have had changing rooms on that side of the room. It had a rather horrendous carpeting on the floor. And my understanding is that that room was originally the student health services. Those 2 rooms combined with the chiropractic offices, as we know them now, was all blended together as part of the student health services. So anyways, it was remodeled into our classroom, and we put down the tile floor, and the best thing about it is the collapsible wall between the 2 rooms, because it allows us to have separate classes during the day and then larger classes on the weekends for whoever is using the room for continuing education. So I think it's worked really, really well from that perspective. So one of the things that's been really important to me and really important to our school is to be leaders. I've really wanted us to be leaders in our profession, leaders in Minnesota, and leaders in massage therapy across the United States. And so one of the things that was really exciting for us was, after we'd been in existence for 3 or 4 years, we started to hit our stride a little bit, and we wanted to expand into more healthcare venues. One of them was the hospitals. So we're very proud of the fact that we're the first massage therapy school in Minnesota to approach any of the hospitals and to talk to them about bringing massage therapy and therapeutic massage practices into their hospital settings for inpatient care. And also maybe expand their thought processes for people to continue with massage therapy outside of the hospital setting in outpatient care. So 3 of the hospitals that we've been connected with, Abbott Northwestern, Regions, and of course Woodwinds. And the way that we started this was that we started it with an externship with Penny George, Institute for Health and Healing, and our students would take part in this externship, and then they would go on possibly to work in these hospital settings after they graduated. We still have several of our graduates still employed full-time within both Abbott and Regions hospitals. So that's been a pretty fun thing. Another thing in 2005, besides the hospitals, is we brought electives into our program. We wanted to expand our curriculum, but we really are kind of stuck because we can't make our curriculum too much longer than it is, because then we're no longer competitive in the marketplace. And so we tried to figure out how to bring more education for our students and not go beyond that time frame, and also make it be something that's interesting for them. So we came up with electives that they can choose whatever interests them, and they can take the electives that they think would be of most benefit to them. So we started our elective program. We've, of course, expanded on that many times since 2005. Then the other thing that was exciting for us was becoming the first school in Minnesota, massage therapy school, to be CompTIA accredited. And CompTIA is the Commission for Massage Therapy Accreditation. It's a nationwide program. It started in 1989, and it was established to maintain the quality and standards of massage therapy and to provide some consistency across the United States, because there's so many massage therapy schools, and especially in the most recent years, there's been a lot of them popping up in a lot of the community college settings and that kind of thing. So to create some consistency, CompTIA was started, and it's run by an elective group of people they call commissioners. It is recognized by the Department of Education as an approved institutional and programmatic accrediting agency for massage therapy. And I'll be honest and tell you, it was my goal from day one that I started here in 2000 that we would be the first school in Minnesota to be CompTIA accredited. I was determined that was going to be one of our pieces. And I was really set on that. And this was also one of the pieces I used when I designed our first curriculum. I did a lot of research. I talked to the people at CompTIA. I wanted to find out exactly what classes we needed to have, so that when we'd been in existence long enough, we could apply for CompTIA accreditation and get it right away. So this is one of the pieces I used as the basis for designing our first curriculum, which is still the basic curriculum we have. It's just been much changed and expanded upon, and those kinds of things, of course. And then also, with CompTIA, Dr. Healy has served as an elected commissioner of CompTIA since about 2004. We were able to apply for our CompTIA accreditation in 2004. We got our official acknowledgement of it in 2005, and we've been accredited with CompTIA ever since then. Now there is, I think, one other school in Minnesota. I think Centerpoint is now accredited also. So one of the other goals that we've always had within our school is not only to give our students the best educational opportunities and to take advantage of some of the things that can't be offered at other massage therapy schools that Northwestern is able to offer. So one of those was bringing in right away from the start our mannequin class, which is the anatomical clay class, which is a fabulous way for a hands-on practitioner to learn three-dimensional anatomy. We were the first massage school to bring that in. We've had that since the beginning of our classes in 2000. We also are so lucky and so appreciative of the fact that our students can go down to the wet lab and observation of the cadaver dissection. That is such another fabulous piece of learning that most massage therapy schools are not able to offer their students at all. And then the other piece is that we've always tried to offer as huge and expansive clinical experiences for our students as we possibly could. As Dr. Sawyer mentioned to you, we've always had a very clinical perspective for massage therapy at this school, and that's really what we're training our students for, is working in clinic situations, working in healthcare environments, and working with the healthcare patients and clients that are out there seeking massage therapy as a piece of their healthcare. And so we want to offer as many and as wide a variety of clinical experiences as we possibly can. So we've had lots of different clinic options along the way. This is just kind of a partial list. Our first clinic started in UHS, and of course then we were down in Burnsville. And we've been at Pillsbury House and Courage Center, which is now called Courage Kinney. Edina Care Center, working with cancer and hospice patients. Of course, our hospitals, La Clinica, and Volunteers of America, which is nursing home and memory care. So our students have been involved in all of these environments, and it's been such a wonderful piece to bring to their education, because they get to figure out what they like, or maybe equally as important, what they don't like, before they actually go out and start taking a job that may not be the best fit for them. We have a day and an evening program still. We've had that since the very beginning, and one of the things we've done is we have coordinated now the classes between the day and the evening program, so our students can go between the two programs if they need to. If a term they need to go to an evening because of their schedule and life circumstances, they can do that. They could also possibly even take partial day and partial evening during the same term. So we've tried to make our schedule blend with each other itself as much as possible. Our further expansion in 2010, we brought on the AAS degree, Associate of Applied Science. And that degree is our core curriculum, and in addition, there's a general ed component that they have to do, and then some additional elective classes that they have to do. It takes about 1.5 to 2 years, depending on how people space it out, to do the AAS degree, and about 90 to 95% of our students complete the AAS degree program right now. So that's the program of choice for most of our graduates. And then as of this year, April 2015, we graduated our 34th class of students to leave Northwestern with the wonderful Northwestern reputation behind them and our wonderful signature on them, and we're very pleased and proud about that. And I guess just lastly, I would say that as we look to the future for the School of Massage Therapy here at Northwestern, the one thing that we know is that we will continue to pursue the very first goal that we started with, which was for us to be able to graduate the very best trained clinical massage therapist that's entering the job market when they graduate. And that still is our 100% committed goal to our students, is we want them to graduate as the very best entry-level clinical therapists that they possibly can. And we'll do everything to make sure that that happens. So that's it, I think. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Let's thank John, Barbara, and Joni one more time before we have lunch in the... Lunch is being served in the Healing Garden, and pick up a t-shirt. Thank you.